to be on the air with you. I am Riccoh Player, and I am joined by my Paris Island graduate and Marine veteran and firefighter and serial entrepreneur, Zachary Green. And we have the pleasure of speaking with my main man, Trevor Matich, today. What's special about Trevor is he is a 15-time, yes, you heard me correctly, 15-time Emmy winner. I just got one and I was good to go. This guy has 15. Trevor, thank you, my friend, for joining us today.
Colonel Player, Zachary, it's an honor for me to be here. Knowing you guys and your leadership and what you've done to get to this point, I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, Trevor, the pleasure's all ours, and I think the timing is perfect as we're coming off of close to a Bengals victory, just 3 points away from that. And, I think it's very appropriate we get an NFL legend like yourself as our next person to talk about the Warriors' voice and all the lessons you've learned from your incredible experience and background. So
I tell you what, if you know any big Marines that can play offensive line, send them to Cincinnati. They need some.
We need a lot more than that. You got that right. Well, tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up? Kind of talk about, school, and kind of give us your life story, if you don't mind.
Well, where we are now, the headline is kind of extraordinary, and I never would have guessed that I'd be here. You mentioned the Emmys. I've been broadcasting now for I don't know how many years. I'm going into my 19th year at ESPN. I've covered the NFL for various organizations, which is where the Emmys came from, and it's been tremendous fun. I mean, I was on the national championship team at BYU football team in 1984. Became the first round draft choice offensive lineman ever from BYU into the NFL. I played 12 years in the league and just had an amazing time. And when I look back at the beginning of it, it was not like that. When I look back at the beginning, you never would have thought I would have been that guy, because I was growing up one of the smaller kids in my class. I was slow, uncoordinated. I was the last kid picked at recess for, football and softball and things like that. Sometimes they wouldn't pick me at all. Sometimes they just choose teams that wouldn't pick me last. They just go play and leave me standing there, right? And so no one would have thought that I would have been an athlete in any way. I tried out for the 6th grade basketball team and made the team because they kept all the 6th graders because they had no cuts. They figured that going forward, there'd be more competition. This might be our last chance to be on a school team. So I was on the team, never played. Got to 7th and 8th grade, tried out for the basketball team, both years got cut. Football team had no cuts, flag football. So I was on the team both years, never played. Got to freshman year of high school and first year of tackle football. And I really wanted to be tough and show them that I could do this, right? I'm still small, uncoordinated. I'm a little meek. I'm a little scared of everything. And I made the team, no cuts on the freshman team. And I played in the 5th quarter. This is an extra quarter that happened after the regular 4 quarters were over, so that the kids that were so bad they couldn't play in the regular game could play in the 5th quarter, so that the parents wouldn't get mad at the coach for not playing their kid. I played in the 5th quarter, right? Didn't play much at all my sophomore year. Junior year, I got into 1 game. And then I got to my senior year of high school football, and now I need to decide what to do. And I had failed basically by any measure at every school sport there was. I'd never started. I never played. Every team that could cut me did cut me. The football teams just didn't have cuts. Now I'm going into my senior year of high school. And what should I have done? I would love to tell you that I was a forward-thinking, real positive kid, but really I was just too naive to understand that I wasn't good at this sports thing and I should just stop and enjoy my senior year doing other things. So I tried back out for the football team my senior year, and it was the first time that I ever earned a starting position at any school sport. And that year I was in Sacramento, California. I was all conference, all city, all Northern California. I was nominated for high school All-American. And I got scholarship interest from about 60 schools. So, going up to that point, it kind of worked out okay.
Yeah, we got to stop you there, Trevor. I mean, that wasn't the flick of a switch. That didn't happen overnight. You were the smallest kid out there. What was your Warriors voice then? You didn't call the Warriors voice then. I got it. But you were the small guy, and I've been there. What kept you going?
What kept me going was that I wanted to be good. I wasn't really good at much else, and I wanted to be good. And I was willing to work at it. And so I think that Warrior's voice, I didn't recognize as a warrior. but I did the things that I recognize now that somebody in a football warrior context would have done. And so freshman football on, I went out early before practice and stayed late after practice, and I worked on little drills, and I looked awful. As a matter of fact, I had a nickname that followed me around of Surefoot, because I would trip and fall over things that weren't there, right? But I was out there trying to get better when everybody else was in the locker room and heading out. I stayed and did extra stuff every year up until my senior year. And then between really my sophomore and senior years, I went from a short, skinny kid to a tall, skinny kid. And my footwork was there. And when the door opened, I was able to do the things that college coaches wanted to see, which is to say, I was very agile. I could move very quickly. I had good balance. I was just skinny, but my dad was big. They saw that I could put a lot of weight on my frame. And so that was the start of it. I wanted to be good. I didn't know how to be good. The only thing I knew to do was to go out before and after practice and work extra. And it worked out. Now, if it hadn't worked out, would it have been wasted time? No, because that same go the extra mile, go the extra effort is what I've done, what I did in the NFL, but certainly what I do in broadcasting now and everything. I try to do that. I try to outwork people because I'm not better than most people. I just try to work harder than they do. And so I got to BYU on scholarship. I was a 17-year-old, 217-pound freshman on a nationally ranked college football team with a future first-round draft choice at quarterback, right? And by the third game, I was elevated to the varsity because I asked the coach what he needed from a backup center on the varsity. He told me what to do, and I went out before and after and worked on those drills, worked as hard as I could to develop the skills because I wanted it. And I also knew that at 17 years old and 217 pounds, I wasn't going to go out there and smash people. So I had to play with better technique, and I had to be smarter about the game. And those are the things I learned to do when I frustrated those big guys, frustrated them badly. I mean, they would punch me in the face all the time because I would do little things in technique that would stop them, and it embarrassed them because I was so small. But when I got punched in the face, I saw that as good because they were trying to hurt me, which they couldn't do. I was wearing a helmet, for goodness sake, instead of trying to throw moves on me. So that worked well. And that I took into the NFL as well. Bruce Smith, I had a story about him with that. We could talk about that a little bit if you'd like, where I took some of those same principles and I used them in the NFL. But the thing is, people look at the trajectory, and they'll look at people that are in the NFL and they'll say, man, I would want to do that. I really want to do that. I would do anything to do that. But then you tell them what it takes. And you tell them, well, you got to do all this extra work. You got to give up all these things that you like while other people are out doing them. You got to be working, right? You've got to be doing all the little things, and most people won't do it. As a matter of fact, you look at Tom Brady, right? I think that's a good example because he's retiring now. What makes Tom Brady the greatest ever? Well, it's not because he has been gifted with great physical talent or stature or strength or anything else. It's because Brady wanted it worse than anybody, and he took that desire. And it drove him to do the small, mundane things, the small habits that are boring, that anybody can do for a day. Most people can do for a month, but very few people can sustain over an entire season and then for 20 seasons plus, because the sustenance of those small habit forming things are what's hard. But those small things in terms of working on technique, in terms of film study and the way he studies film relentlessly without stopping, without breaking the habit, that's what made Tom Brady, Tom Brady. And I was accidentally doing a lot of those things and didn't even know it. Now I look at Brady and I can define it because he defined it. But in doing those things, that's what kind of got me to where I was.
You're blowing us away, man. I mean, we want to jump in there, but we want to hear what you have to say at the same time. And it's just incredible what you're sharing. So I got to back up just a little bit because I would do a disservice to our listeners if I didn't unpack a couple of things. So you said the door was open, or there was a door, and opportunity is being ready when it's there, when it presents itself. And in listening to you, I would say grit is your anchor for your Warriors voice. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And again, I wouldn't have defined myself as having grit or toughness at the time. I just was tired of not being good. I was sick and tired of being the last kid picked or not being picked at all. I was sick and tired of being on the team and nobody cared that I was on the team. I was tired of it. And who knows if I had been blessed with the talent or the body to be able to change anything, but I was going to do everything that I could. So I think grit is fair. As I look back now, I think that's what it was. At the time, I was naive. I was scared. And I was more afraid of failure than I was, I think, wanting to win. I wanted to win. I wanted to be really good so bad, but also I just didn't want to lose.
Fair enough.
Trevor, I
Zach,
think
I
that
won't hog it. I'll toss it to you, Zach. I'll be quiet for a second. Only a
no,
second.
no, that's so rich. And it's so common with all the warriors that we have interviewed on our podcast here. There's a great quote by Walter Bagino where he says, one of the greatest pleasures in life is succeeding when other people tell you that you can't succeed in it. And I'm sure I butchered that quote somehow or another, but the tenacity, the persistence, the fact that most people at that young formative age in high school, which is so crucial, and you're hearing over and over again that you're not good enough. You literally have kids that go to counseling as an adult because they were last on the kickball team. And what you did is you used that as an opportunity for iron to sharpen iron and to get stronger. And as Colonel Player always says, develop your rhino skin and really propel that to the absolute top level of your field. So hats off to you. And this is just great information to hear for us and our listeners. This Warriors journey is not something made up. We're hearing example after example, and Trevor, is great that you've shared that.
Well, I appreciate that. I loved our home fans, but I loved playing on the road more than at home because I love to shut them up. I love to shut up their fans. You know, I love to go out and beat that guy in front of me, knowing that his girlfriend is up in the stands watching me beat him. And, you know, there's something to be said for that. But then at home, your girlfriend's in the stand and you don't want her to see you get beat, right? So there's all these things that become extremely personal beyond just playing. But another thing was just I learned how to fight back, you know.
We're talking NFL, Trevor. We're talking NFL.
We're talking NFL. And as a kid, I mean, when I was in the third grade and I had a crush on Sally Peak, and Cole Broders also had a crush on Sally Peak, but he was the big bully in the third grade, so he came up and punched me in the stomach. And I didn't do anything. I didn't know what to do. I just got punched in the stomach by Cole Broders. What am I supposed to do, right? So, you know, and I got into the NFL, and I was at 4 years at BYU, and we called Provo, Utah, the bubble because it wasn't really the real world in a lot of ways. So I entered the NFL as maybe the most naive rookie to ever enter the NFL. Not a knucklehead. I just had no idea what kind of brutal business this was. And so in practice, you know, guys would, you know, I'd do well in practice and guys would give me an extra shot after the whistle, right? And I just didn't do anything about it. I just went back and huddled up and ran the next play, right? Then they do it more, And I wanted to be liked. So I didn't do anything about it, didn't say anything. I thought if I played well enough, that would be enough. Well, football is a different context from other things. So I don't want people to think that you do this in your accounting office or in your, you know, your high school classroom. It's not the way it is. But what I learned, and this principle is true in all those places, it's nice to be liked. It's better to be respected. And what I didn't know is that my teammates were pushing me to see if I was a fighter. They pushed me to see if I would stand up for myself, because if they didn't trust me to stand up for myself, how could they trust me to have their back in a game, right? I didn't understand that. So I thought I was doing the right thing to fit in. No, I was actually doing the opposite. And that first year, I put myself way behind with my teammates, right? And then I got hurt and couldn't do anything about it once I started to figure it out. So my second year, I fought every day in training camp. And when I say fight, sometimes that meant, yeah, fight. And in football, fighting is a certain thing. You can't just throw down and brawl all the time. You'll get kicked off the team. You know, it's short and sharp, and there's things you can do. I have a 6th-degree black belt in football fighting at this point. I can take somebody's helmet that's strapped on and take it off his head and hand it to him, even when he doesn't want me to. I mean, I'm good at this stuff. But I fought every day. You know, I mean, guys would give me, I'd beat them in a one-on-one pass rush drill. And, you know, they, after the whistle, they give me an extra shove just to show them that they're still the boss. And I'm right back in their face, right? And guess what? It felt good. It felt good. But there are other ways to go about it besides just that kind of a thing. My first or second year, I can't remember, early in my career, the New York Giants came up to practice against us in New England in training camp, just to have a different change of pace. And Lawrence Taylor lined up over our left tackle for a one-on-one pass rush drill. And he beat him bad and embarrassed him. So our left tackle, after the whistle, just as the whistle was blowing, chased him over there where the quarterback was supposed to be and pushed him. So Taylor looked at him, looked at the coach, and he said, again. So I'm just this young guy thinking, oh my, what's going to happen? So LT lines up over there, ball snapped. He threw this amazing move on our left tackle. Our left tackle didn't even touch him. Taylor just went right around him full speed, ran over where the quarterback was supposed to be, jogged back to his side, and didn't say a word. Didn't say a word. right? And I thought, man, I want to be that guy, right? And so when I left New England, there's all kinds of things that happened when I left New England, but I left during training camp and went to Detroit to kind of restart my career. There's a whole bunch of stories there, but they're probably not germane to this conversation. So I went to Detroit late in training camp, and my first practice there was a nose guard, backup nose guard that was this big, massive, hostile dude. And they knew who I was. I was a former first round draft choice, and here I was with them. And he was going to show everybody on the team that he was the boss, right? So I'm down over the ball as a center. Quarterback is under center, not in shotgun like we do now. And he did a hard count. Nose guard jumps, hits me as hard as he can, knocks me back into the quarterback. And he's laughing. The defense is laughing. So I'm thinking, okay, it's nice to be liked. It's better to be respected. So we go back to the huddle, call a pass play, come back out. I snapped the ball, got my left hand up, and grabbed his breastplate on his shoulder pad with my left, and I pulled it down and forward. Then my right hand came up from the snap, and I grabbed the right side of his breastplate on his shoulder pad, and I pushed up and back. So he was off balance, and I slammed him to the ground so hard he bounced. Stood over him just for a beat, went back and huddled up. And you could hear the whole team saying, all right, the new guy is okay. That's how you do it in football. You do it in other ways in other places. But, I learned that I hated to be pushed around and do nothing about it. And bullies are fun to me now. I love bullies. So sometimes you can't do anything about bullies because, they have a position where it causes more harm than good. But now I love bullies because when you stand up to them for a prolonged time, they tend to wilt because they're used to people just fading away. So that's fun to me now. And you don't bully somebody back. You don't be a bigger bully than the bully. That just makes you a bully. You use their reasons that they bully against them. And I learned that in the NFL. And I tell you, it felt so much better to understand that I don't care if you like me, but you will respect me.
Fair enough. So Trevor, you've talked about part of your childhood. You've talked about BYU. We've talked about the NFL. So all those are compartmentalized now. Then you're transitioning to your civilian world or post NFL. What was that like?
Well, I played 12 years in the league. My contract was up with Washington. They offered me another 2-year, largely guaranteed contract to come back and play some more. At the time, I was all banged up. All I could do was long snap, but they wanted me to come back and be the long snapper. And Fox had offered me a job being an NFL analyst for them. So now what do you do? How do you walk away from this dream of the NFL? But then again, how do you say no when the door's open for broadcasting? And so, it was so hard to make the decision of which direction to go. And, I prayed about it. And finally, the night before Fox was going to make an announcement that I was going with them, I got on an email and emailed a friend, just like 15 email pages long, what my reasons were that I was leaning to leave. And at the end of it all, I felt so at peace. And the last thing I wrote was, I prayed that I would know that this is the right decision. I think this is an answer, right? And since then, I have never looked back. And so I went into broadcasting, worked at Fox for a few years, did NFL and then college games for them. Then I moved over to CBS to do NFL games for CBS, and had a great first year. But the guy that brought me in then left the next year, went to a different company. And the guy that took his place, I was the old guy's guy. He was going to bring in his guy. So now I start all over again, right? And so there were fits and starts. And finally, I was doing local Washington football team analysis on the local Fox affiliate in DC, having a great time. And I went, I wanted to see if I could get into NFL at ESPN. So I put together a tape, which was a magnificent tape. It was just fantastic. ESPN is about a 6-hour drive from Washington, DC. And I didn't want to just FedEx it up there and be, one of 200 tapes in a box that they'll get to eventually. And so what I did was I drove 6 hours to DC. I walked into the gatekeeper that kind of is the guy you got to get past in order to get your tape to producers. I had a conversation with him for 90 seconds, turned around and drove 6 hours back to DC, but he had my tape and he looked at it. Nothing happened for a little while. But then later that summer, they called me up and asked if I could do college games. I'd never, college games was not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do NFL studio, right? And so but they didn't have a an NFL studio position available. They had college games because somebody had to step out of his role, stepped into ESPN, did games for the first 3 years, and now I do mostly studio. And it's been amazing. But I do the same kinds of principles though. You know, I go the extra mile. I'll watch tape until my eyeballs fall out, and I've come to be known as one of the best at doing telestrator breakdowns there, and I'm very proud of that. That they see me that way. They actually send young producers to me to train them how to tell stories visually through the breakdown tapes. And so,
Storyteller. You are a
yeah,
storyteller.
yeah. Well, what we're doing is not X's and O's if you do it right. What we're really doing is comic books.
Right.
You have a story that you want to tell that's illustrated with the pictures you put up. And then there's certain ways to do it to make sure the audience is looking in the right places. But when you talk about that warrior spirit that you guys are talking about, I never thought of this way either. But I don't know, maybe as soon as I started doing studio at ESPN, so I don't know, 15 years ago or so, every off season I would jump in my little car and I would drive all around the country visiting college football programs because now I was doing mostly college for ESPN. I'd go on campus, I'd talk to the coach, I'd look at their facilities, all that stuff, just to get a better feel for what's happening because I didn't necessarily trust everything that I read online, right?
Okay.
And I would put in, 8, 10, 12,000 miles in an off season. My own car, I'm buying the gas, I'm paying for the hotel, not expensed at all, right? And going around the country doing this. I'd be out on the road for 6 weeks sometimes, just driving. And I went to Texas one time because it was great for me and it was great for them because, now I knew things that other people didn't know that if it came up in the season, I could address it accurately. But I didn't know how they saw me until I stopped by Texas one year. And Mac Brown was the coach at Texas at the time, national championship coach. And I was in his office talking to him, and I figured I had about a half an hour with him. Well, we blew by the half hour. We're going up to an hour. And I knew he had a local reporter in his waiting room waiting for me to get done so she could come in and talk to him. But coach wasn't giving any indication that that the meeting was about to end. So finally I ended it. I thanked him for his time and I started to stand up, right? And he said, thank you for your time. He said, we make time for people who do the work.
Mm.
We make time for people who do the work. And I never understood, I never even thought of how do they see me when I do that? Well, they see me as somebody that's willing to show up, right? And so that told me something. And when you talk about warrior spirit, I think part of that is if you're respected by other warriors, right? But you can't be respected by other warriors because you jump up and start talking a good game. You have to show up. You have to do stuff. You have to suffer. Yeah, it has to hurt, right? But then you end up with an outcome that's a better outcome. And so from that standpoint, and I continue to do it. I'm about to take off and head down to some faraway places here in a little bit. And it's all related back to those years when I was terrible at football, wanted to be good, hated being bad, and did everything I could to try to get better, not knowing if it would ever pay off on the football field. It did, but if it didn't, it would have created habits that helped in other things, like they help in broadcasting. So it comes back to the same thing. I think part of that spirit that you guys talk about is not just me and what do I get? What's my reward? Part of it is that I have an obligation to my football teammates to be the very best that I can be. And if I'm pretty good, but not the best that I can be, I'm failing them. And I have an obligation to my audience as a broadcaster, to the producers who put me on, to be the very best that I can be and leave no stone unturned. And if I'm pretty good, but I could be better, I'm failing them. And that's not good enough for me. So that's kind of my perspective.
And I think that's the absolute heart of the warrior spirit is selfless service, having a cause that's bigger than you and doing whatever you can to honor that cause and honor that. Your cause is not about you actually snapping the ball or writing those plays out. It's about entertaining your customers. It's about giving them something to look forward to, inspiring them. And I think that's great. Who are some of the people that you look up to, Trevor? I mean, you obviously just talked about the coach, but give us an example of some of those warrior heroes and mentors that you kind of get your strength from.
A lot of the guys were guys that I played with or that I was coached by. I was very fortunate to be coached by just phenomenal men. And that was important because my mom was a divorced mother of 4, teacher who worked 2 and sometimes 3 jobs to keep food on the table. And so she put us in scouts, Terry Meinzer. was my scoutmaster, and he was an absolute mountain man. I mean, a true mountain man, but a wonderful role model. And I wanted to be like Terry. And Terry taught me that your mother's not here now. And that was a shock because I was a kid. I was young. I was scared. Remember, I'm slow, uncoordinated, last kid picked, going my first camp out. And I was struggling a little bit. And some of the guys were like, they're eating beef jerky out of my pack. I didn't know they were doing it. And I said to Terry that, hey, Terry, they're eating beef jerky out of my pack, and it's kind of hard right now. And he said to me, he knew that I was okay. So I was in no danger. But he said to me, figure it out. Your mother's not here and I'm not your mother. And it was a shock to me. Wait, I have to figure it out? Well, that's modeling what a man does. Oh, my mom's a great mother, right? But that's modeling what a man does. My coaches at BYU, head coach Lavelle Edwards, legend. He was the kind of guy that didn't talk much. When he did, people listened. And if he occasionally raised his voice, it was like there was a volcanic eruption. Everybody stopped and fell to the ground trembling, and there was wailing and gnashing of teeth. Because with Lavelle, you didn't perform for him because you feared what he would do if you didn't. You performed for him because you feared that he wouldn't respect you. And that respect from him was everything. That was the kind of man that Lavelle was. Roger French and Mel Olson, my offensive line coaches at BYU. And then I was fortunate to have some unbelievable coaches in the NFL. But then there were guys too. Lomas Brown and Eddie Murray with the Lions, Jim Lachey at Washington. There were guys that I looked to as peers, but I also looked to as guys that I wanted to model. I wanted to be like those guys in a lot of ways, the way they conducted themselves, the way they prepared for the game, the way they respected the game. And I think that if you respect the game of football, you can tell. You can look from the outside in and you can tell that they respect the game. If they like the trappings and the rewards of the game, they might be good at it, but you can tell that too. And so I looked to the guys who respected the game, and I tried to be like them as much as I could. And those are some of the guys that really stood out to me.
Outstanding. Trevor, as we're drawing to a close, first and foremost, I can't thank you enough for being on here. I could say it 1,000 times and it still wouldn't be enough, but thank you. I learned 2 things from you. And then I asked my last question, I'll turn over to Zach. Grit from the very beginning. And oh, by the way, your mom has a Warriors voice too, just for the record. Your grit has been consistent. If there was anything that kind of binds that grit together, it's your brilliance in the basics. We do the same thing in the Marine Corps. If you are brilliant in the basics, everything else aligns or falls into place. And my last question, my friend, is what did you earn your first Emmy for?
I earned my first Emmy for doing something that wasn't being done anywhere that I saw. I was with the local Fox affiliate in Washington, D.C., covering the Washington football team. And I found out what their technology could do. And I wanted to show certain things on tape in terms of what was happening and why they happened. But I needed to be able to pause here and highlight this guy and draw an arrow there and do things like that. And nobody was doing that, and so the technical operator thought I was crazy. But I was in there with them saying, okay, well, can we do this? Well, I guess we can. Okay, if we combine that with that, then we can put it together this way, right? Yeah, I guess we can. And so that's what we did. And so that Emmy year was strong on opinions, and it was strong on those telestrations, because that was fairly unique. I think maybe wholly unique at the time. And so it was kind of fun. I kind of taught that guy how to use his machine.
Outstanding. Great. Thank you.
Well, I think that fits into, again, another great warrior trait, and that's adaptability, being able to improvise, overcome, and adapt. I don't think I have any more questions, Trevor. I could listen to you talk all day. I will tell you that your words spoke very deeply to me, as I'm sure they did to a lot of our guests. My biggest crucible in my life was at Parris Island, when I realized I wasn't a civilian and was learning how to become a true Marine warrior. And the drill instructor leaned over me and said those exact same words that your coach said to you. And he said, your mama's not here to help you. So when I hear that, a common warrior trait is we love our mamas, but at some point in time, we've got to make that transition. And I appreciate you sharing that story with us.
I appreciate that. And if we have just a second, I'd like to say one thing that also is really inspirational to me. Football and warfare are not comparable, but I've done a lot of work with the service academies. And they tell me that there are a lot of principles that they share in common in terms of tactics and focus and things like that. Although the import of it and the risk of it, obviously, we're not making a comparison with that. As a matter of fact, I was talking with an Army coach many years ago. He was drawing up a screen to try to get an advantage over a team that was bigger and stronger than him. And I said, that kind of looks like Stonewall Jackson's march around the Union right flank at Chancellorsville. He said, that's how we teach it, because that's how they relate to things, right? And so I try to read a lot of books, not just military history, but what it's like for the soldier and Marine on the ground. And one of the most inspirational books I've ever read was called The Last Stand of Fox Company. It was from the Korean War and the Chosin Reservoir Campaign, where there was a hill that had to be held so that Marines could get from the north down to the south. And if the enemy took that hill, the Marines up north would be cut off, and it would have been terrible. So a few hundred Marines held off thousands and thousands of enemy for days, running low on ammo, freezing to death, all the things in that. And to read their stories was devastatingly inspirational for me. But the end of that book, I don't want to talk out of school. If you haven't read it, you'll like it anyway. At the end of the book, the survivors got together. Their uniforms were torn, they were bloody, they were completely messed up. They marched south to get to the next base to the south, because Fox Hill now was no longer necessary. And as they were marching into that base, they formed up and they marched in order into the base singing the Marine Corps hymn. Mm. And I can't relate to what it was like for them, because I've never been through that. But in a football sense, I've been through things with brothers. And that kind of dignity under that kind of pressure is really powerful. So in a lot of ways, I envy you, but more than that, I respect you, both of you, for what you've done, for the leadership that you have shown, for the men that are better men now, better husbands, better fathers, better men, because you were their leaders. And I respect that so much. And that's one of the reasons that I am so grateful that you had me on today. Thank you.
Trevor, thank you. Iron sharpens iron. And sometimes when that happens, sparks fly, and that's okay. It's been tremendous having you on the show today. And as with every episode, Zachary and I like to close dedicating the episode to one of our fallen service members. I was combing through and trying to find someone NFL related, and I came up short, but I found Major League Baseball. And with that, it's Sergeant Dan Bankhead. He was the first African-American pitcher in Major League Baseball. Before that, he played in the Negro League Baseball for the Birmingham Black Barons and the Memphis Red Sox from 1940 to 1947. Then, when Major League Baseball began to desegregate, he played for the Brooklyn Dodgers from 1947 to 1951. And during World War II, Sergeant Bankhead served in the Marine Corps Reserves from April 1942 to June 1946, and he was honorably discharged. But while he was in the Marine Corps, he played for the Montford Point baseball team at Montford Point, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and toured the United States to help raise morale and support the war effort. When President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 8802 in June 1941, Black people were, for the first time, permitted to join the Marine Corps. Bankhead received his recruit training in a segregated unit because between 42 and 49, the camp at Montford Point was a recruit depot for Black recruits, and they trained more than 20,000 African Americans. When Bankhead joined the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947, the Corps was still segregated. But in 1948, by Executive Order 9981, President Truman ordered the military to integrate. Bankhead, during his pitching career with the Dodgers, he amassed a win-loss record of 20-9, earned a run average of 4.83 and 228 strikeouts. Sergeant Bankhead, he was born May 3rd, 1920 in Empire, Alabama. He died of cancer at Veterans Administration Hospital in Houston, Texas on May 2nd, 1976, a day before his 56th birthday. May he rest in peace. And with that, Zachary Green, my friend, how do we close every episode?
Semper Fidelis. All right.